Good morning again. Did that worship set just wake you all up? If it didn't, you need to be woke up again. That was amazing. Thank you all so much for your passion and your music. I love it. Good morning. It's good to see you all here. It's good to see some more faces today. I love it. It's been a great week. How have you been doing with your prayer? Have you been asking the Lord to show you those opportunities to show gratitude to someone? I've gotten some great stories in this week. I love it. Keep sending them in. So we're going to start with this new series called The Prayer of Agur. And you're probably going, what's that? Well, before I get into that, I want to just kind of give you a little bit of a setup. So how many of you remember the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears? Goldilocks. Okay, so you kind of know the story. Essentially, we have to ignore the fact, it's a great story, right? But we need to ignore the fact that Goldilocks is a criminal. She's guilty of breaking and entering, burglary, and destruction of property. If you remember the story, you know all those things, right? But the story gives us a great place to start for this new series because, well, let's just recap the story. So Goldilocks breaks into the house of the Three Bears. They're not home. She walks in. She sees that there's breakfast is set on the table. There's 3 bowls, and she thinks she's a little bit hungry, so maybe she'll have some breakfast. And so she goes to the first bowl, and it's too hot, and the second bowl's too cold, and the third bowl is just right, and she eats it all. Then she tries the chairs, and the first chair is too hard, and the second was too soft, and the third one was just right. So she sits in it, and as she sits in it, it breaks to pieces and shatters. So she's now broken the furniture. And then after her theft and larceny and vandalism, she's a little bit tired. And so she wants to take a nap, and she goes and checks out the beds. The first bed was too hard. The second bed was too soft. But the third bed was just right. So she snuggles in and takes a nap. Well, in the meantime, the bears come home. And they open up their home, and they find that the house is a mess. Breakfast is gone. The chair's broken, and there's a stranger in one of their beds. Well, she wakes up, and she's frightened, and she takes off out of the house and never has to account for her troubles. So she runs off and escapes felony charges. This is Goldilocks' story. But, we're left with a 2-word worthy goal of how to do life. Just right. Right in the middle. Doesn't that sound great? Your food's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's just right. The bed's perfect. Our income is just right. And, all of that stuff is just right. That would be a great place to live, right? Well, this is basically what we call balance. It's finding balance. It's avoiding extremes. And you could call it God's sweet spot. Doesn't that sound nice? Well, what if I was to tell you that God wants you to live in his sweet spot? So what is a sweet spot? What do you all think about when you think of a sweet spot? Anybody want to share? What do you think about? No stress. I like that. Athletes, tennis players, and I don't play tennis, but I've heard this, that there is, on the tennis racket, there is a sweet spot. And if you hit the ball in just the right place, it has the maximum velocity, the maximum bounce, there's no vibration, and everything's perfect. It's just right. In your job, your sweet spot might be the job that you absolutely love to do. You go to work every day, and you would do it even if you didn't get paid for it because you love it that much. You do it well, and you get paid to do it. That's the sweet spot. It's not striving for more. It's not striving for bigger and better houses or a bigger and better paycheck. It's finding just the right spot. It's not living in a mansion. It's not living in a cardboard box. It's just right. So what if I told you that God wants this for you? We have a sweet spot in God's life. God has this perfect place for you. It's where you're living in purpose and not futility. You're living in clarity and not chaos. Doesn't that sound great? You're not running too fast. You're not running too slow. You're not striving for bigger and better. You're not living out of that cardboard box. And there's balance and there's contentment. That's the name of the game here, balance and contentment. So let me give you a little background into this series about Agur. Agur is the author of Proverbs chapter 30. Have you ever heard of Agur? I hadn't either until I started looking through this sermon series. Well, here's the thing. He prays this prayer in verses in 37 through 9, and we'll get there, but I want to talk to you about this first. About Agur, it's entirely possible, like you all said, that nobody has ever heard of Agur. You may have read it, but didn't even realize that's who he was. And that's okay, because like I said, you're not alone. He's not ever been on my list of people to emulate. I just learned about him myself this week as I was preparing for this. Agur is a great comedic writer. He sees the observations and he writes about them in a pretty humorous way. I mean, the language, you gotta kind of weed through it a little bit, but he's funny. And then verse 37 through 9 is his prayer.